Everybody. This is the halftime update for Vikings Philadelphia. What a first half. It's 24-10. Um, one thing. Oh, by the way, I'm your host, Joe Johnson, owner of VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com. One thing I've said about this Vikings defense a lot to start this season, outside of the fact that they've, I believe, had the strongest start to a season that they've had under Zimmer, is that they're very resilient. There's been plays or series that have come at very pivotal moments in these games, or momentum changing moments in games, like the last week, the fumble that Dalvin Cook had, the fresh set of downs also that they had last week after Linval Joseph illegally hit the center during a field goal, and they ended up pushing that Giants offense further back than the field goal attempt they had previously. Stuff like that really, not to be cliche here, but has a championship feel to it. A lot of the criticism this Vikings defense has had under Zimmer, especially or increasingly lately, is that they don't show up in big moments or during big games. And I'm not really trying to hyperbolize what's going on here in the first half of the Eagles game, but for them to hold on 4th and 4 to end out the half was incredibly important. If anything, I mean, the Eagles gave up 3 points there, and that's, you get burned when you go for it on 4th down as often as they do. I think the stat they showed earlier in the game was that they were 3 of 9, and so I think they would be, 4 of 11 now, 4 of 12. Either way, that was huge. Those 3 points were huge. The entire thing was huge. Coming off of an interception that was on Diggs. That was a typical play for the Vikings to pick up a first down, that rollout, kind of broken down play on the sideline. It's more often thrown to Thielen than Diggs, but obviously it hit off his face mask, ended up going into Sendejo's arms for a great interception, but again, huge. Shout out to the defense for that. That was amazing. Diggs obviously outside of that, had an amazing first half. He would have had 3 touchdowns if not earlier in the drive, the final drive, excluding the one where they ran out the clock. Had Thielen had Cousins hit him in stride, not overthrown him a bit, but it's hard to really rag on Cousins for the half that he had. Before that interception, he was 12 of 16 for 209 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's now 12 of 17, 209, 3 touchdowns and an interception. That's amazing. Before the game, in my pregame show, I mentioned that I'd hoped that Cousins and the Vikings offense would be able to build off of what they were able to do against the Giants, that the schedule gods had smiled favorably onto the Vikings, because while this isn't a Super Bowl caliber Eagles team, at least at this point, they are obviously a lot better basically everywhere than the Giants, especially with Saquon Barkley not playing last week. And so I thought it was a good stepping stone to build on the confidence from the Giants game, because it's at home. It's a weak secondary that's banged up for the Eagles. The Vikings are obviously taking advantage of that, but at the same time, they're a better opponent, and they're above 500, and we all know the Cousins' record against 500 teams. So I thought it was just a good opportunity for them to build upon what they started last week after a disastrous performance against the Bears, and they've done that. I mean, it's been a great first half. They're still up by 2 scores. It feels like it should be a lot. The score discrepancy should be a lot bigger than it is, but it's still a 2-score game. The Eagles were, for the most part, getting shut down. This Vikings defense came out on fire. The home field advantage is evident. But I do think it's not just that. It's not just their how amped up they are. It's the play calling, obviously. The Zimmer and company are a lot more aggressive. They're doing a lot of different looks. There's on that play that the color commentator keeps complaining about, the Trey Waynes hold. I shouldn't even do that. He was holding. It should have been a flag. They blitzed Harrison Smith. I love just seeing stuff like that. I think that the Vikings have the personnel on defense to, should a blitz get picked up, to compensate for it. I don't think it's a huge risk to blitz more often because you have guys at every position on defense who will pick up the slack should the opposing team pick it up like they did in that instance. Granted, it's not the best example because it should have been a penalty, but you guys know what I'm saying. Cook, it seems, I was looking at the box score in regards to the run game. Somebody asked me over under 120 total yards from scrimmage for Cook. I said over, even though my gut said under. I felt like he looked more successful than he ended up being. 2.6 yards per carry average, 10 carries for 26 yards, and then 2 for 13 in receiving. So what is that? 39 total yards. If the score continues this way and he has to run the clock out, hopefully he'll be able to build on that. It did feel like the offensive line did have some push early in the game, but Fletcher Cox was also omnipresent there. But it is really good to see Diggs getting his. It just shows. I know there was a busted coverage on that second touchdown, and that the ball could have gone to either Thielen or Diggs, and there was one safety back there. I don't know how that happens. They clearly thought the Vikings were going to run the ball, and it was. But it's a really good example of just how when this Vikings team is running the ball, I won't say effectively, but at least committing to the run, that it can really create even more of a pick your poison situation for these defenses. I mean, it's really exciting to see games like this, even though it's not as big of a blowout as it appeared when it was 24-3. And Peterson is a elite offensive mind, and he'll have adjustments at halftime, and Zimmer has historically struggled a little bit in regards to mid-game adjustments, especially against elite offensive-minded coaches. But it's if things hold up the way they are now, the Vikings put some more points on the board. It's really hard not to get enthusiastic about what this team is doing. There's just so much talent on both sides of the ball, and when Cousins is playing well, as he's doing right now, it's just really, really exciting, because the reason they brought him in over Case Keenum, who had a fairy tale year in 2017, is because he can make all the throws on the field. And I know some of you are saying, or punching your keyboards, or probably sending me funny messages. Keith is back. I love you, Keith. He can make the throws down the field that Keenum couldn't. He, when playing well, can go through his checks and see all the available options for that specific play. Keenum was tethered to a leash. It was really, here's your two options. If the down the field option is gone, just check down. That's what the offense was. Now, when you have a defense as good as the Vikings have had, that can be effective. I mean, especially in 2017, I think the Vikings allowed 15.8 points per game. So all you need to do is average 17 points a game. When you have the type of 1-2 punch at wide receiver, when you have an effective tight end who catches over 80% of balls thrown his way, you can win and go really far in this league. Now, the Vikings, they wanted to do more than that, though. They saw what their peak was. They saw what happened when they went against those offensive-minded teams the second half of that Saints game, the entire Eagles game. And so they bet heavily on Cousins because when protected, there's a lot that he can do. or when even not protected, if he can roll out. And so I think we're starting to see some of that. We saw it to start the season last year, and a lot of people forgot about it because of how bad the offense looked in the second half of the season, especially in the last few games. In the Packers and Bears games, it's especially in the Bears game with the coverage breaking down, Cousins looked atrocious. Now, I also think that was a play calling the entire thing on both sides of the ball. But I've talked about the defensive side of the ball in the Bears game, the Chase Daniels things. I talked about it before the game. They weren't getting Cousins out of the pocket. They weren't rolling him out. They weren't getting him in motion where he feels comfortable. They weren't doing those play action bootlegs, any of that. You see what he can do when that's the case. So even though the run game hasn't been what we've come to expect of it this season outside of the Bears game, I think we're starting to see a little bit more of what Cousins can do when he's comfortable, and that's really encouraging and exciting. And this is coming from a guy who made a video after the Bears game saying that I was off the Cousins bandwagon. That doesn't mean I'm hopping right back onto it. I'm just saying that this is very encouraging, and it's showing why maybe Chad Greenway said not to panic at 2-2. That having been said, it's the Eagles, and their secondary is not good. So I don't want to look at a Giants game and an Eagles game and then read way too much into it. I'm just saying that it's very encouraging, and I think it's a little more nuanced than Cousins having some sort of mental breakdown every time he looks at a upcoming opponent and sees that they're above 500. I think there's more to it than that. And obviously, the NFL is a week-by-week league, and we've seen two types of Vikings offenses: powerhouse offense and bad offenses. But again, I think they're building towards something, and as long as things stay the way that they looked in the first half, in the second half, we can be really encouraged going into a really rough game against a Lions team that is better than we expected them to be. But even when they haven't been great, they've given Zimmer and the Vikings fits. So I am very happy right now. I hope they come out firing in the second half, and I hope that they can just put this game away, run the ball a little bit more effectively, take some time off the clock. But I don't want them to take their foots off the neck of the Eagles either. I want them to continue to take shots and not get too prevent defensy or one-dimensional on offense. They need to get to 40 points, not just because I predicted a semi-blowout, but because it would just be nice for them not to do what the Vikings have done my entire life, which is start strong and then kind of let other teams creep back into the situation. Yeah, I agree with you. Keith on YouTube said that there's no team that does not have something that can be exploited. It's about finding it and going after it. And that's obviously what they're doing here. And I hope they continue to do so, because we know Doug Peterson is a good coach, and he's going to look at what the Vikings are doing on defense, and that he's going to attempt to do what you just said, which is exploit what he's seen. Now, I think the Zimmer and Edwards have done a good job of mixing up their coverages and doing a whole lot of different stuff. So it's going to be very hard for them to do that. And I mean, outside of that drive where it kind of felt like the defense was asleep a little bit, I'm stealing that take from Mr. Joe Oberly, who's in our live chat right now. The defense has really been great. So I'm hoping they'll come out and get a 3-and-out, and we'll go from there. But it's, everything's good in Vikings land if that's why you're here. All is well. Let's get through this game and then look towards the Lions next week for a huge, huge, huge divisional game. I'll be back after the game taking more of your guys' thoughts. Keith, hopefully you'll make it, but I'm hoping to take some questions. This will be the last time that I do a post-game solo. I'm going to be doing a new show with Kirby, who is the host of About the Labor and also the managing editor of PurplePTSD.com. He's actually at the game right now, which is cool because he lives on the West Coast, so he's in town with family watching the game. And we'll be doing a new two-person show, which I'm excited about. But after the game, Hopefully you guys will have some questions. The reason I brought up the other show also is because we're going to try to do more listener, watcher, reader participation, whether that's actual live call-ins or just taking questions the way we are now. Remains to be seen. Usually when we do call-ins, they all end up being about how fat I am, as if I don't own mirrors. So we might not do that. Not that I'm afraid of it, but I'd rather just focus on football. And as a Vikings fan, I cry enough. I don't need to cry also in HD. So thanks for coming back, Keith. Man, you guys are great. Money thoughts. Your name looks familiar as well. So hopefully we'll all be happy after the game and we can enjoy a 4-2 Vikings team. Knock on wood. Check out my cool display too before I go. Those I don't know why I'm pointing at my screen as if you can see it. Those Miller Lite. That's a cardboard cutout. I have a ton of other stuff over here that I haven't even shown you guys now that I have this HD camera. Some really great stuff. Oh, yeah. Green Bay really sucks. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'll be back after the game. Skol Vikes. Let's finish this out strong. See you after the game.